everyone. Welcome back. Expanding the Zone. I'm Shayne Combs of SVCSportZone.com, joined as I am every week by my brother Matt here in the picture next to me. For those of you watching us on our YouTube channel, that's SVC Sports Zone Shayne. If you're listening on your podcast app, thanks to our friends there at Buzzsprout, you can see us, you can get our podcast there. What Matt, iHeart, Spotify, iTunes, across the board. And Matt, I think we have a real fun show 15 here tonight, where we're going to talk about favorite sporting events and why are those things our favorite and how it relates to high school. But as always, in terms of leadership, we don't want to harp on it. But as I say hello to you and welcome you to the show, what kind of updates can you give us in terms of what's on your mind as an athletic director? And it's a busy time for you. You're learning, as we all are, every day. Kind of what's on your mind before maybe I introduce kind of the fun route that we're going to go here this week.
Yeah, leave it to me to talk about the bad stuff, and then we'll have some fun, right? But I want to give a quick update. I mean, I think we have to kind of stay current with what's going on with the COVID stuff and as it pertains to high school sports. It seems like a week. Within a week, a lot happens. A lot of news comes across, and
Sure.
We're at a point right now where we've had some counties have to shut down their athletic training and stuff for a while again. Some counties are still able to have some of that. The interesting thing, probably the most interesting thing that came out this week, and the thing that probably caused the biggest stir, was the OHSAA coming out and saying that we are going to move forward with fall sports as of right now on August 1st, but that it'll be up to the individual schools how they want to handle that, or whether they want to have certain sports or whatever. And it caused, kind of like on social media, it caused a stir. People sort of criticizing the OHSAA, saying it's a lack of leadership. It's a cop-out, things of that nature. And as you know, on this show, I've never been hesitant to voice my displeasure with the OHSAA, but I think in this case, I don't know that there's a lot else they could do. It comes down to this. The OHSAA has two choices: cancel sports or go ahead with sports. And if they go ahead with sports, it's not like they can force schools to go ahead with sports, if that makes sense. I mean, they can say, the OHSAA, make no mistake about it, they have the complete ability to cancel sports. That's what everyone needs to understand. They do have the absolute power to do that, because not only could the Ohio High School Athletic Association say we're not going to have state tournaments in any of the fall sports, they could also do, if people remember back into the spring, Shayne, they went on a dead period. Remember that? They announced a kind of like an emergency dead period, where no contact period, I think is what they referred to it as, but a no contact period where you couldn't do anything. And they could very easily do that again. They could very easily say, hey, we're in a no contact period, we're not going to have fall sports. But so they can do that. But on the other side of that, in terms of having fall sports, the only thing they can do is say, hey, we're going ahead on our end. We plan on hosting state tournaments in these sports. They can't force schools to participate. I mean, a member school has the right to say, hey, we don't feel like this is right for us. We're not going to have football at our school, or we're not going to have volleyball at our school, or whatever, soccer. So when the OHSA came out with that, I'll be honest with you, I wasn't all that surprised, nor did I think it was, poor leadership on their part. I just think if they're going to try to have sports, that's the best they can do. Hey, we're going to have it. It's up to you as a school whether you can make it work or not in your community. I don't know if you have anything really to add on that, Shayne. I just thought that was that was the one thing probably that jumped out at me the most.
Well, I think what's really interesting is all of the different schools in our area. I've even talked to some people outside of the area, forming committees, a lot of surveys, getting a lot of feedback, and really starting to put their protocols in place. And as we've said on many shows here before, leadership's at an all-time premium right now when we get ready to enter this stuff this fall. So I had seen the tweet there, at Matt Combs 25, correct, on Twitter.
Yes,
for those that follow there. I thought it was well said. It's one of those where you have a couple choices. I don't know that either is going to be the perfect solution for what people want to hear, but nonetheless, I agree with where you're at right now, and I think it's a pivotal 2-3 weeks coming up, and we're certainly going to follow it. And Matt, as I transition to this show tonight, we said obviously we want to have some fun, but as always, we're very serious and very passionate in terms of always trying to figure out where can we make our high school game better? How can we make our high school athletics more intriguing to the student athlete? We obviously believe in what athletics can do for our student athletes, and we are athletes ourselves, and we spent now our entire adult life as coaches and teachers and administrators and so forth. So we're obviously very, very passionate about the things we talk about here on Expanding the Zone. And where I wanted to go with Expanding the Zone show 15 here this evening, I got to thinking about my favorite sporting events. And these are things that, be at the high school level, college level, professional level, the can't miss things every year. And what are my favorite moments? And these are very personal to people, because a lot of times it's your favorite team. Like for me, as you can see here behind me, if for those watching me on YouTube, big Cincinnati Reds fan. Cincinnati Reds opening day has always been a very special thing to me. Maybe it's maybe it's just because it's my favorite team starting baseball. Maybe it's because I love baseball, and I know baseball season is going to be relevant for several months to come at that point. Maybe it's the optimism of even the Reds might be good this year. Whatever it might be. The March Madness is one that jumps out at me. At first Thursday, Friday, I think that's a special sport time for a sports fan. If you're a basketball fan, you have your bracket, you have an investment in it. Maybe your favorite teams are in the bracket, but really just having your bracket seems like you don't even have to be a sports fan or a basketball fan to fill out a bracket. Okay, so it's something that people relate to. I'm a big golfer. Maybe it's a major on a Sunday. We put this out on Twitter. Appreciated the feedback. You got a lot of Super Bowl, got a lot of World Series, NBA Finals on a couple emails I sent out, personal message. Buddy of mine, John Bruce, who I do SVC Sports Talk, he actually mentioned one of my sleeper picks, Major League Baseball All-Star Game. That's one that every year. Good friend of mine, Joe Boggs, talked a lot about rivalry games, and that was common throughout the high school game, Michigan, Ohio State. I know, Matt, I'm not even a North Carolina Duke fan, and still to this day, every year, I set the DVR there so that I get a chance to watch Duke, North Carolina, just as a basketball fan. So we're gonna break this down from about 8-9 different angles. I guess first I would just ask you to just kind of the fun part of the show here. When you think of those things, but let's maybe stay at the college professional level, and then I want to go directly to high school here in a little bit. What are some things that maybe we share, or maybe what are some things that even jump out at you that you would add to that list, or maybe if you agree with some of them, maybe expand on why?
Yeah, I think we probably had some of the same ones. For me, interestingly enough, it's like I had to look at it from two different angles, because it was like if my favorite team is involved, then some of those events would definitely be like can't miss for me. I'll be honest with you, as big a sports fan as I am, I'll watch the Super Bowl, but if my favorite team's not in it, it's not like I live and die with every play, right? You watch it for the sort of the spectacle of it. My wife likes the commercials, so we'll sit there and watch that, right?
Right.
But in terms of as big a baseball fan as I am, the World Series, the All-Star game, yeah, I could take it or leave it. I mean, now if my favorite team happened to ever be in the World Series, which would be a minor miracle, it seems like, yeah, I would be on living and dying with every pitch on that. But no, I agree with your opening day in baseball. I think for me, I would say the Masters. That's by far my favorite golf tournament to just sit and watch. It's even better if the right people are competing on Sunday, I think, for a championship. That makes it even more intriguing. Yeah, I agree with the March Madness. I think especially the first week of it, you have all the underdog teams in it, and everyone's sort of vying for a first round upset. Like you said, normally you have a bracket with it. you know, the rivalry stuff is always neat. The Duke North Carolina, just because you can feel the intensity,
Mm,
don't you think? I mean, it's like
absolutely.
even if you don't like either
The
team or you
atmosphere,
don't
the
really care much,
tradition, yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's just like, and obviously being a High State fan, High State Michigan, but there's other football rivalries too that you could just tune in, whether it's Auburn, Alabama, or you know, just to sit there and just see the intensity and how every play means so much to both teams. I just think if you're a sports fan, that's pretty cool to watch. So, yeah, those are some of the ones for me. Now I'm not nearly as into the All-Star games as you are, especially Major League Baseball All-Star game. As much as I like baseball, like I said, it's certain things for me in baseball that really intrigue me, mostly with the team that I like the best. But yeah, I guess those would be a few of mine.
You know, as I go through this, and I'm going to transition into high school here in a little bit, I have a list of things, Matt, and I kind of purposely didn't really share this list with you in much detail. I just want to, what I want to do here is I want to kind of introduce a quick topic, give a quick description why. If it's something that you think hits home, you know, talk a little bit more about it. If not, just kind of pass it along. And like I said, I've got about 6, 7, 8 things there. The number one, why things reach our list. I think reading the people on Twitter, reading my Facebook messages, my emails, all the people that have responded to this in appreciation. I appreciate that in terms of getting ready for preparation of the show. Number one, things that don't happen often. I think oftentimes these things are unique because they don't happen all the time. We talk about the popularity of maybe football a little bit, you know, playing 16 NFL games compared to the 82 NBA, 162 Major League Baseball. Um, so maybe it's a little bit more of a shorter sample size. Obviously, opening day is opening day, right? It's one
Right.
time. Um, what's your take on the role that something that doesn't happen very often in terms of really influencing this list?
Well, I think anytime that's that event only takes place a few times, it probably grabs your attention if you're a fan of that sport or whatever. I think, you know, I have some friends that make fun of me for baseball because, you know, I'll say, hey, the Reds lost a tough game last night. Oh, well, that's crushing since they only have, you know, 140 games left or whatever. Well,
Right.
I get it, but it's like I think you have to have a certain it's sort of an acquired taste, isn't it, to be like a
Mm-hmm.
Major League Baseball fan over the course. Now, this year is going to be interesting because with 60 games, all of a sudden, does baseball take on that feel of
A little
you
bit
know,
more
almost,
meaningful, yeah.
yeah, like man, I mean, all these things count. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think that's why you get you know, I'm not a huge NASCAR fan, but you'll get certain people that rally around certain races, right? That are traditional, um, or some people that are horse racing fans. You know, um, the Kentucky Derby and the Preakness, some of those types of events that you know you get ready for every year, and there's not very many of them. It's a once a year deal. So yeah, I think definitely it's like anything else when there's when you just get a little taste of it and you don't get it all the time, it's going to be something more that you look forward to and that you really get excited about.
Well, you touched on one that was on my list here, so I'll go to it next. You know, the kind of the showcase or the event itself. I know we've talked on past shows about you and I have really tried to balance the education aspect versus the entertainment. And what role does that play in high school sports, and what role does it need to play in high school sports moving forward to kind of sell athletics more to the modern day student athlete, modern day family? Don't you feel a little bit? I heard you talk Super Bowl earlier. That was on everybody's list, it seemed like. But it's not necessarily the sport of football as much as it is the halftime show, who's singing
Right.
the national anthem, the commercials, as you said. And you know, maybe you have one of those squares where you're just paying attention to what's the
Sure.
score at the end of the first quarter. You know what I mean? There's always something
Right.
that's kind of there. Don't you think sometimes it's the event or the showcase of the event? And maybe I'll even double up here and ask you as we tie this into high school. Do you think high school is missing some of those particular things, or we kind of better off leaving those alone? Do we not want that to cross over into our high school game?
My view on the entertainment side of it, as it pertains to high school, is I'm all for creating a better fan experience or whatever. But I think what happens sometimes, if you're not careful, is the entertainment starts to swallow up what's supposed to be the actual on-field product or game. In other words, that becomes the center of focus more than the game itself. You'll see this a lot, like with groups that want to come to a football game to do some sort of presentation that night, or
Mhm.
you've got people wanting to sell certain things, and all those things are fine, but we have to remember, I guess here's what I always tell people: we have to remember what we're here for. We're here for a game
Right.
between two high schools tonight. All this other stuff is great, okay, but we're, at the end of the day, we're here to watch two teams play. And that game, I think, has to be the number one thing. So in other words, for instance, you take high school football. If I'm having to try to extend halftime, which isn't something you're even supposed to do, and all of a sudden, oh, we've got to have a 30-minute halftime or 35-minute halftime. Well, all of a sudden, I'm interfering with the game. I've got
Right.
coaches, players in that locker room that are sitting around getting tight, not being able to stay in rhythm and get back out there. I've seen it in volleyball. And people that know me know that I'm as big a guy as any for Volley for the Cure. I think it's a great thing. But I've also seen Volley for the Cure situations where there's so much going on between sets that players and officials are standing around saying, when are we going to get the game going again? You can take it too far. So
True.
the entertainment is great, but I think we have to remember what we're there for, and ultimately what we're there for is the game itself. Don't let entertainment take over the game itself at the high school level.
The next thing on my list comes from the feedback as well. I think it fits perfectly. The results matter. I think a lot of championship games are mentioned, or games that really influence the overall champion of that particular sport. As you said, if it's something like the U.S. Open, the Masters, PGA, that in itself is a championship. A NASCAR, a big race, you mentioned the
Right.
Kentucky Derby. All of those things are results driven. I want to compare that to the results maybe not mattering as much. You mentioned earlier if it's an NFL game, their sell is every game matters. College
Right.
football, every game matters because we only play 16 of them, or we only play X amount of league games or whatever it may be. Whereas in baseball, that people will talk about, you lose that a little bit. The NBA, 82 games back to back tonight, so and so, a little load management. What's it matter? You kind of, in today's time, what's it really matter if you're the 2 seed or the 4 seed? You're gonna,
Well, right. I was
well,
getting ready to say half your teams make the playoffs, in the whole
right,
league. So
right,
all of a sudden, does the regular season? Remember the argument? Remember the argument for college football was always, we don't need a playoff. The whole season's a playoff. Every
mm,
game is a championship level game. I didn't buy that, and I think that the playoffs should be extended to 8 teams personally. Um, where every power 5 conference gets a bid, and you have some wild cards or whatever. But what I'm saying is, the argument was always, don't water down the regular season. Remember that? That was always the argument with
right.
college football. And I guess you could make that argument in some other areas too.
Well, I think you're exactly right, and I've always said, like with college football, what bothers me at the end would probably be the bowl season. In all my years, I just don't understand what it means to be the Sun Bowl champion.
No,
What's
it
that even
doesn't mean
mean?
anything.
You know what I mean? Like, what's it mean to be the Citrus Bowl or the Gator Bowl champion? When you talk college football playoffs and you talk Final Four, I understand what that means. You know what I mean? Hey, win a game, you get to go to the championship. Win that game, we'll call you national champions. When they'll highlight, hey, we got a great matchup in the Gator Bowl this year, and so I don't even know what that means. So my thing is that I wanted to ask you is, in high school, I know, and I don't want to speak for you because I know you kind of had some pros and cons. You weren't a huge fan of the 22 games there. For
Right.
a lot of our listeners that don't remember, high school basketball here in Ohio used to be 20, and recently, not too long ago, went to 22. And I know you kind of had some mixed feelings about that. What are some of your thoughts that go into playing, say, an extra 3 or 4 baseball games, or now playing 2 more basketball games, or looking to expand and give volleyball a couple more non-league opportunities. What's your take on expanding things such as high school boys basketball, girls basketball, going from 20 to 22 here in the state of Ohio not too long ago?
Well, my thoughts on the 22 games were this, okay, and I had just taken over as district director around the time that was coming forth, I guess, or actually coming to fruition. It had been, I think the Coaches Association had pushed for that for a long time. So I felt like my job was to support the Coaches Association, especially since the majority of people wanted 22 games. All right. I'm just saying personally, I wasn't a huge fan of it. And the main reason was, and still is, I don't like the idea of adding games to a schedule, but not adding time to the schedule, not adding calendar days to get those games in, because in our part of the of the world, I guess, right here in Ohio, uh, it's hard enough in the wintertime when you have weather and issues like that, canceling contests or whatnot. It's oftentimes hard enough to get 20 games in. All of a sudden now you've got to fit 2 more games in, but they didn't give us any more time to do that. It's like, hey, here's the same amount of time to get an extra 2 games in. What's happened is most teams very seldom get the whole 22 games in, or I don't know about most, I should say a lot of teams don't get to 22 games in because of weather situations. They end up getting some cancellations. They're not able to make it up. I mean, I know last year my basketball team had to play a league game after the tournament. Had to play a league game where both teams were already out of the tournament. We had to get together and finish the league schedule. So it's just hard enough as it is without adding that game. So it wasn't necessarily that I wasn't for the games as much as I wasn't for the way we were going to have to try to squeeze them in. I'm all for more opportunities for kids, more games for kids, whatever. I just think sometimes we don't adjust the calendar appropriately, I guess, for that.
What role does regional culture and holidays and some different things, I've talked to some friends who, and again, it's really cool on our podcast show. We've had some listeners from out of state and so forth. And I know down south they play baseball a lot earlier, therefore they can play more. It's just better weather. But I also hear a lot of people talk about how, man, basketball and those winter sports, you're dealing right at the start of Thanksgiving, you're dealing with Christmas, the New Year. You got a lot of different things you're trying to balance where you don't necessarily have a lot of those things in fall or spring. Spring maybe runs into the Easter weekend. What's your take on one, how much the culture, the region of the country you live in terms of impacts what you can do weather-wise, but two, the impact that, just the time of year you play and when school is in, when school is out, those holiday breaks, those sorts of things. What roadblocks or tough things you think leaders run into when they try to get creative with the schedule?
Well, yeah, it's really challenging because you mentioned basketball. Just use that as an example. You run into a lot of things going on right around the time of the start of basketball season. So you have Thanksgiving, all right. So you have the holiday now, and keep in mind now. Okay, so let's compare this to maybe 20, 25 years ago. Families now seem to get, or people in general get a little more worked up if you're playing close to the holidays or you're practicing on the holidays. So like Thanksgiving, I've had situations where we have opened our season the day after Thanksgiving, but yet most people expect me not to practice on Thanksgiving. So, I'm not supposed
girls
to practice.
Basketball, girls can go shop after the turkey digest, but if you even thought about having basketball practice, Katie bar the door. You know what I mean?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. I mean, we act like Thanksgiving's this sacred family time where everyone's sitting around the turkey, right? I mean, but what happens is, like you say, hey, let's go shopping at 10 o'clock at night.
Hey, but let's set up our tent outside, H.H. Gregg and get the best.
Yeah, but we can't have practice, right? So, whereas as well as I do, Shayne, you can remember, I'm sure, practicing on Thanksgiving morning.
Oh, yeah.
Coach making you come in on Christmas Eve morning, saying, "Hey, we're not going to take 2 straight days off. Let's get in here early." Whatever. It used to happen some, and now that's a lot harder to get away with. I think people frown upon that a little bit more now. So with basketball season, for instance, beginning of the season with Thanksgiving, but then also, and you didn't have this before, you run into the college football league championship games, right? That you didn't have to. It used to be the college football season ended. You had all this time before the bowls or whatever. Now all of a sudden that weekend's also the Big Ten championship or that. So now all
What
of a sudden,
impacts attendance and ticket sales and
yeah,
everything, doesn't it? Yeah.
I've seen tip-off classics that were once hugely popular in high school basketball lose their luster, lose attendance. People just aren't going to those. So it begs the question, what we're talking about here tonight, like how can we reinvigorate the start of like basketball season, for instance? Football, high school football, kind of that first Friday night, everyone's sort of excited, right? I mean, it's opening Friday night for high school football. Everybody across the state of Ohio is playing on the same exact night. So football kind of gets that like you talked about with the Reds opening day, football gets that opening night feel, right? But some sports, it's sort of lost that I don't know what the right word is.
Well, let me interrupt here. Let me interrupt and give you just another thing on my list: optimism. Like I mentioned, Reds opening day. You mentioned August 1st. Fall practices start right. Basketball. It's really kind of weird because you're in the middle of football season. You'll have like week 9 girls basketball starting on that Friday. Week 10, a lot of times boys basketball starting or the next morning or whatever. It's just bizarre. But like, don't you think when we talk about opening day or first day of practice or whatever it is, that optimism plays a role? I always joke that the coach hasn't had time to be an idiot yet. He or she hasn't played the wrong people or made the wrong strategy call or whatever. Everyone's kind of has optimism. I joked earlier that, hey, even the Reds could be good this particular year or whatever. But you believe that, hey, if this happens and this happens and this happens, hey, we could be pretty good this year. Don't you think optimism of the starts of season? I know as a coach, I'm sure this many years later, it still gets your juices going to know that, hey, today's first practice, that type of thing.
Right.
What role does optimism in the beginning play in those particular things, you think, in terms of the experience that you felt throughout just, gosh, almost 2.5 decades now?
Well, it does. Okay. So let's say, like you say, first practice rolls around, everybody's sort of fresh, that energy, we're ready to roll. I guess the question is though, Shayne, then how do you, in some sports, how do you carry that into the opening of the season, in terms of the game season? Like, for basketball, for instance, I sat and I thought about it. What could be done maybe to make a basketball opening day, so to speak, the same energy level as, say, a football week 1? And I don't know what the answer to that is.
But I think there's got to be more spacing, doesn't there? I mean,
well,
fall has such what's going on August 1st other than first day of fall practices? And then when it comes to football Friday night, what's going on other than football Friday night?
Right.
What happens in basketball opening day is you still have football playoffs going on, and you still have kids in fall sports.
Right.
Or this golfer might have went to state, or your soccer team might be in the regional. And I know in baseball we go through the same thing. Isn't there just too much overlap in terms of what they've tried to squeeze into the season?
Probably. I mean, let's face it. If you could work it out to where, you didn't start basketball maybe until the second week in December, finish a little later. I'd have to, there's a lot that goes into that. Okay. Like it's not as easy as just saying, hey, let's look at a calendar and do this. There's facilities availability for state tournaments and things of this nature. So there's stuff that goes into that. I know, but you're right. I mean, the only sports that really get a free pass in terms of starting fresh are fall sports, because after that, everything sort of overlaps and intertwines, I mean, the last few years, it seems like, about 80% of the years, it seems like it's been week 10 of high school football is the first official boys basketball practice. That's how closely the seasons are butting up against each other. And it just makes it really difficult for people to, it's almost like athletes especially need to take a breath, right? Okay, I just finished football season. Well, we'd like to give you more time off, but here we go, buddy. We got to jump right into basketball now.
Right.
Yeah. So it certainly makes it tough Whereas, like you say, and it goes back to my thing about the 22 games, though. How can you squeeze more and more and more games in if what we really need is more time between seasons? You see what I'm saying?
Well, it kind of goes back to this is really flowing together nicely here this evening. The next word I have down is convenience. I look at fall sports as being very convenient. Now, I've only coached a few fall sports here and there. The majority of my coaching career is obviously been basketball, baseball, and I've coached those at multiple levels, boys, girls, different schools. I have spent some time coaching golf and some different things, but I've covered in terms of the website svcsportzone.com these sports now for over a decade. And to me, Matt, and tell me if you disagree, the convenience of fall sports really lends itself to success. You're kind of getting your own in a normal time when COVID-19 is not relevant or whatever. I know here in Ohio, we would enter dead periods in August, and it's basically here fall sports go, and you take off. You're not in school quite yet. You get a chance to really practice and meet and organize and do a lot of different things. And then, when you consider like the football schedule, you're talking once per week. You're talking same night, pretty much same time. I know that's why a lot of people even panic when you have a Saturday game or you try something different, because football finds its place in society almost as football Friday night. It
Right.
starts at 7:30. Even some areas have tried to move it to 7, and people freak out about that. I mean, it's so you don't have to ask, well, what time is it? Is there a freshman game? Is there a JV game? Are they doing this? Are they doing that? It's same time, same night. It's either home or away. And you only get about 5 chances a year to come to those home games, and I think it lends itself to some tailgating, to some community. It's morale, it's funding, it's truly a link to the community, where I think as the year goes, you don't get that particular thing, as I said, in terms of the overall schedule. My take is, if I were to say this to you, tell me what you think about this. I've always wondered, why can we not start fall season a little bit earlier? Why could we not, I know some sports need more prep time, but again, in late July and so forth, why couldn't you get it rolling? I know some fall sports are off and running, like golf's playing within the first 10 days of August or whatever. And
Well, yeah,
state
I think
tournament
as
is
early as
finishing.
August 5th.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, and think about it, their state tournaments finishing up week 7, somewhere in there in
Right.
football.
Right.
Volleyball, not as much, but it almost has to, because again, girls basketball, you're practicing like week 9 of Friday night football. So I mean,
Right.
it's to me, one major piece of calendar that we have would be to push up and go earlier if we're going to see the need to expand all these, because I know here in Ohio we're talking more expansion and playoffs and so forth, and I'm all for that because I think it's exciting. I think it's incredible for community. But I guess what I would ask is, would it not be an option to move some things up and get going in August a lot sooner? And do you think that would buy you a little bit of a week here, a week there, really the rest of the year, in terms of transitioning from fall to winter and then winter to spring?
I've always wondered this, Shayne, and it's interesting you brought that up. I've always wondered why football, like especially football, all right, and maybe even volleyball. I'm thinking of the sports that their season runs long enough to where it really gets into the next season, because a lot of these fall sports, they're over with in plenty of time. Golf and tennis and girls tennis in the fall, golf, and some of these sports, cross country goes a little further if you make it all the way to like the state level. I think
And see, I get that. If
I,
you're one of the final 4, 8,
right.
16 teams in the state of Ohio or state of whatever playing, I get that. But in a lot of cases, it's just your normal regular season or sectional tournaments running into it.
Well, take football. I mean, to me, football's the one that I've never understood this. Why can't football practice start mid-July? All right, so
Does it
it,
anyway?
well, no, that's what I was going to say. Most teams use their camp days,
Yeah.
okay, for the last week of July or whatever. why can't practice, I'm talking like real practice, start mid-July so that by mid to late July, you're in pads and you're going, okay? And why can't then the season start instead of, the last weekend of August or whatever? Why can't we get the football season started maybe 2 weeks earlier? Think about what that would do. If you start football 2 weeks earlier, to me, there's a lot of benefit in that. One, the end of the season doesn't butt up against the winter sports as much. Okay, that's the most obvious one. To me, then you'd also you don't have your state football championships necessarily running into Thanksgiving. Okay, because that's really what ends up screwing up everything is the football championships having to deal with that holiday. Then basketball has to be moved around for Easter, supposedly, okay, is what the story we always get. So what I'm saying is if football starts all the way back in the middle of July, it helps everything. All right, it helps
Right.
every sport have that space, maybe even spring sports being able to have a little more flexibility and time on the back end of the schedule. I don't see a real negative. I mean, the other positive is I think as an athletic administrator, if I had my first game or two before school started, that takes a lot of pressure off me in terms of getting a
Sure.
field ready, getting
Right.
facilities ready, not having to deal with just your first few days of school. Because a lot of athletic directors, I'm not, but a lot of athletic directors, they teach a class all day long. So you get
Sure.
into school and they're busy and all that. So I don't see a downside of starting earlier. I mean, some people are going to say, well, we have fairs and we have this and we have that. And I would say, welcome to the world of a spring sports coach, right? Where everything in the world
Yeah.
interferes with what you're trying to
Right.
do, right? But like,
Yeah.
to me, do you see, am I missing something or could we not start that? Or could we not start official practice in mid-July and have our first game, say around, August the 12th, the 15th instead of the 20 something.
Well, I think there's a lot there. If I'm being honest, the whole time you were talking, I thought of a previous show in terms of, well, why do we do it the way we do it? And the answer might just be, well, because that's how we've always done it. You know what I mean?
Right,
Like, and we've
right,
talked about that where it's just the creativity of doing it. What would happen is you'd have people mad at first or different people not like certain things, and then after a while, you know what they'd do? They would adjust to the fair and different things.
right,
I know to the county north of us here, there's the pumpkin show and the different things, and they're involved in things when school starts and kids are in and out, and they make it work for forever.
right.
So yeah, that's an interesting factor. The next thing on my list, and this one's tough. Okay, I don't mean to put you on the spot here, so if I catch you off guard, I'll give you a second to think here. But I had down another thing that makes certain sports more popular is a personal investment. I think of in the NFL, Matt, for example. I love playing fantasy football. Now, some people play
Right,
for a lot of money. The betting's really big nowadays. I don't get into a whole lot of that stuff, but I know just the competition of I'm in a fantasy football league, and if my team's
right,
playing your team that week, hey, who's going to win? You know what I'm saying? Or or the March Madness. Everybody has a bracket. So there's some sort of investment. You could have
right,
some useless 13-4 game, and it's not like that Gator Bowl or whatever it is. You know what I'm saying? It's a meaningful 13-4 game because you want to see on your bracket. Or if my pet peeve, maybe we'll do a show on this sometimes. My pet peeve is the person who has like 7 brackets. Be like, hey, I had that in one of my brackets.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
if you give me 2 brackets, I can get every game right at least once. I mean, like, it's I don't, but I'll save that for another show. But my point is that investment makes people link to that. I've always felt like that lends itself more to sports like football, and maybe people will say, man, I can't play fantasy baseball. I just can't follow my team 162 games a year. Or, man, that fantasy basketball, I got to check my lineup every week and who's playing 82 games at my guard spot. And it's a lot tough. It's a lot more difficult. I get it. So I guess a 2-part question. One, do you follow what I'm saying about that personal investment? And then the second part is the really difficult one. Have you ever, in all of your years, as things like this grow and technology grows, have you ever started to fear a little bit of this stuff getting into high school sports? I mean, I've seen a couple areas flirt with some high school fantasy football, and it's been very innocent and very different thing. But do you see any fear in terms of these fantasy things, or even betting, or different, with all the image and likeness and all these different things? Do you understand where I'm going there? Is
Yeah.
there ever a fear of that stuff creeping down into the high school game? And I mean, I guess it's a very obvious thing. That wouldn't be a good thing, would it?
Let me look at both of those questions
Sure.
first. Well, first, let me say that evidently your ethics when it comes to March Madness brackets is a lot better than your euchre ethics.
Yeah. Well.
People will have to go back to one of our earlier shows to get that joke if they didn't listen.
Yeah.
But no, the personal investment thing.
But you really shouldn't do a second bracket if you're a true basketball.
Well, we may have to do a separate show on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because if you're running the fundraiser, you're all four people doing a couple different brackets. Because normally what happens is they just screw them both up, right?
Right.
You keep the money. But no, the personal investment thing, I think I definitely understand what you're saying in terms of like having a reason to pay attention, I guess.
Right.
Now, but at the high school level, I'm not sure where to go with that other than I think the obvious personal investment is if you're a parent, right? And all of a sudden you may be the biggest girls tennis fan in the world because your kid's playing girls
or you
tennis,
just
right?
you would like to think that you're invested in your school and community.
Sure. I mean, that's the whole thing. I mean, there's some people that just love their school and they'll come watch them play everything. So there's that investment. In terms of the other stuff, it's funny. I don't know that I think like fantasy stuff will get down to the high school level. Although you already see like certain forms of wagering or whatever for games, right? I mean, there are some basketball teams, for instance, that people will walk through the stands with those little grids and say, "Hey, pay $5 and pick your numbers for tonight. And if the final score ends in 8-2, you see what I'm saying? Then you win." I mean, there's some of that goes on. There's I think a lot of times with high school sports, the thing, everyone's trying to make a dollar during the games. You'll see bake sales, you'll see t-shirt sales, you'll see split the pots, you'll see, right? I mean, how many times do you see this at high school sports? So people use the games themselves almost as like a fundraising type of deal. That whole image and likeness thing you mentioned, in our neck of the woods, I don't know that you see it a ton. I could see it becoming an issue in certain areas if you've got like a Zion Williamson type of athlete, right, at the high school level. Yeah, who's to say that he couldn't start profiting off his own name
Sure.
as early as high school? Now, we don't see as much of that where we're at, but yeah, I mean, it's something. At the college level, it's something you're going to see if it comes to fruition. You're going to see people doing little local commercial or local ads. I know this sounds a little crazy, but is it unreasonable to think that the star athlete at a certain school doesn't do a radio ad for a local car dealer or a local mall and paul little restaurant or diner in a town? Hey, this is so and so running back for the and that could happen, right? I mean, that type of thing could happen down the road. So is that, I don't know, could that grow into a monster that gets away from us? Maybe. I mean, that's probably a whole different topic for another day, but I just, it's again, it goes back to, if it overtakes the game itself. I keep going back to that. When people ask me, "Hey, can we do this at the football game on Friday night?" Or, "Hey, can I set up a table at the basketball game on Saturday night?" I try to do everything I can do as an athletic director to appease those people and help them out,
Right.
unless it interferes with the game. Again, we're there for the game, period. That's why we're there. All this other stuff is great, but we're there for the game. And if it interferes with the game, I've got to try to stop.
Matt, I've got to ask you about some events and some different things here in the high school level. The one of the greatest things I see when it comes to raising money for community is week 11 football. I
Yeah.
know in small, especially in the small schools, and I see what happens in week 11. I see what happens to your community when you get a chance to host, and the amount of money that can be generated throughout the week, and then especially on that particular night. I know the OHSA has certain guidelines, and that's even started to dictate how people go about their regular season, so that they can set
Right.
themselves up when they feel like they're becoming a program that's going to get this opportunity. Now, I know you have some experience with that. I know you have some different feelings on that. So if you want to comment on that, that's fine. But the question I wanted to further this with: what would hurt under our Ohio format, where the 8 teams are already set in a region anywhere, and 1 verse 8, 2 verse 7, 3 verse 7, anyone could play anyone anyway.
Right.
What would it hurt to eliminate some of these neutral sites that seem useless? That and quite frankly, oftentimes don't even help certain teams with travel anyway.
Right.
What would it hurt to give home field advantage all the way throughout, and truly um, give a little bit of value to being the top seed or the second seed or the third seed or whatever it may be, and kind of help continue to generate for these small communities and these booster clubs the opportunity to host more and more of these events? Do you think it would lose its luster, or do you think that I'm onto something there in terms of, what goods it do these two schools to drive over and play at a beautiful Jackson facility, or a beautiful facility up in Columbus, when they could just come small town Southern Ohio and have a good old football Friday night right there in someone being on their home field?
Yeah, I would actually be for at least right now, week 12, um, being another hosted game by the higher seed. I just think the atmosphere you create with that, and like you said, the revenue you generate. Because what a lot of people don't understand is, okay, yeah, when you host these games, the OHSAA is getting the money for the tournament games. You don't keep necessarily the gate like you would for a regular season game. But like in football, for instance, when you host a playoff game, there's a lot of other money, revenue being generated there,
Sure.
whether it be with your booster clubs. Even like I even talked to an AD once, and I didn't think about this. He says when we host a playoff game, our hotels benefit, our restaurants benefit. Like he said, he told me, he's like, whenever I let our community know that we're hosting a playoff game, they're excited about it, because hey, they know they're going to be packed that night. The restaurants are, or whatever. which in turn, then, what do those restaurants do? What do those local businesses do?
They give back.
They're real quick to advertise, right? They're real
Mm-hmm.
quick to hang a sign on your fence all football season and give you some money for it, because they know that it's coming back to them later on. So I would love to see week 12. I've always been a proponent of this, and I don't want to jump the gun. I don't know what you have in your notes there, but like basketball tournaments, there's been some talk of, and some areas do this in Ohio. They have the higher seed host the first game of the section or whatever in basketball. I'm definitely for this in girls basketball, because you get some really bad crowds for like a first round sectional game for certain girls games, Shayne, depending on the seed situation, especially if it's like an 8-9 game playing in with a couple teams that have had rough seasons. There's like nobody there at a neutral
Right.
site. Whereas if you had the home team host, it may not be a huge crowd, but at least the home team's going to bring some people. The school can get excited about hosting a game. Okay, let's get out there tonight, guys, and support these ladies. Is there, I just think, now the one thing you have to keep an eye on, are the facilities able to host an event the right way, like in terms of capacity. Now, let's see, like in football, I don't think you'd run into this as much. If you're already hosting week 11, why can't you host week 12, right? The only thing you'd run into in football is the possibility of field conditions for schools that don't have turf. You're getting into that time of year where if you've had some rain late in the year, all of a sudden your field's borderline
Right.
unplayable, right? Do you really want to host a week 12 game I mean, you know firsthand at the school you were at had issues a couple of years ago where they couldn't host their own Week 11 game
Right.
due to sloppy field conditions, right? Where so you run into maybe that, but again, you could run into that in Week 11, right? So why not let them host Week 12? I think in basketball you run into, especially with boys, could there be gyms that aren't big enough to host the crowd that comes with, like, especially if you start letting that get into sectional finals or district level games, the crowds get too big for some facilities.
There are different factors there, and I find myself contradicting back and forth, school to school, back and forth, boys to girls, because I know, a lot of times in volleyball or girls basketball, I would favor almost home court advantage, honestly, almost all the way through the district championship. I really would. On the
Yeah.
boys basketball, when we talk about favorite sporting events, one of the biggest things, Matt, that I probably have to give up 2 or 3 times a year, I still get to do it once or twice. If I had it my way, I'd do it 4 or 5 times, is just going and parking myself down at the Convo down there in Athens for our boys tournament. I just really enjoy watching boys
Right.
basketball tournament play, Division II, Division III, Division IV. And as a baseball coach, I haven't always had a chance to do that because, again, the way things overlap. But I think it would probably be bad in some ways to take away the experience of going to the Convo for those communities and for those kids getting to play there at the Convo. So I go back and forth. In baseball, I think it's great to play your sectional at home, and then you go to the district. We're spoiled rotten here in our area because of the VA Memorial Stadium there.
Right.
Not everybody has that. I've scouted 2, 3, 4 hours away over in other districts when we were fortunate enough to win back-to-back district titles and go to the regional. And we would go and scout other places, and you couldn't believe where they were playing their district game compared to where we were getting a chance to play,
Sure.
here at the
Yeah.
VA. So, what's your take then on neutral sites? I mean, throughout the year in most sports, I guess here's what I'm saying. Throughout the year in most sports, I don't love the neutral site. I like the high school atmosphere. There are certain things in baseball when you move to a field with lights or turf or whatever.
Right.
Let's face it, the atmosphere rises big time. You can play at certain times of day that you couldn't play another. But, certain football games on turf, sure, they're nice. I mean, they're fan friendly. It's got to be a beautiful experience for the kids. I guess I would just ask you, if do you feel more positive or more negative when it comes to random shootouts or different things where you're playing on neutral floors or so forth? I mean, it's supposed to give you a tournament feel, but I'll be honest, a lot of them I go to don't.
Well, no, and I think when some of those things first started back in the day, uh, it, they were popular for reasons that no longer exist. So, for instance, like some of the classics in basketball, when they first started years ago, either featured teams that you otherwise couldn't see. Like you'd bring in these teams that were like private academies from different parts of the country that had Division I college prospects on them. I still
Right.
remember watching LeBron James play as a sophomore up in Columbus at an event up there. So you had events like that would give you a reason to be there, or you get to play at a facility that you otherwise wouldn't get to play at. I remember you mentioned the Convocation Center in Athens. For years, there was the regular season event there, a classic, where they'd bring in several teams. Well, if you took your team to that, you got to play at the Convocation Center, so you'd have a reason to do that. You mentioned baseball. Yeah, it's great to play at a neutral site when you're playing on turf under the lights at 8 o'clock, and the
Right.
whole school can come out and watch you play, and everybody's excited about it. There's a reason. So I guess my thing is, if you're going to play neutral site games, doesn't there have to be a reason? I mean, that's the first thing for me. Like, what's the reason you're playing neutral site? And I would say that even into the tournament. So, like, what you mentioned the convo for boys basketball at the district level here in our area. What's the reason for that? Well, the reason is quite simple. The crowds get to a point where high school gyms can't handle them. in a lot of cases. You know, I mean, I've been fortunate enough to coach in some situations down there where I don't know any high school gym that could hold the crowds that were there on those.
Well, and it's fan friendly because you can go and you can watch like 4 games on a Saturday.
No question. Okay. And it gives teams something to play for. They get excited about, hey, we're making it to the Convo this year, we're making it to the district tournament, we're playing in a college gymnasium. And so there's a reason for that. No, I'm just going to say it like it is. I know there some people will disagree, like you got to do the same for the girls you do for the guys. I don't think you do. I think you have a responsibility to make the game as great as it can be.
Mm-hmm.
And as a girls coach, and I know you've coached in some girls sports, you've probably seen some atmospheres that are less than desirable at the girls level in terms of attendance and all that. And I would ask you this: wouldn't you, like you said, wouldn't you be better off to play home sites, maybe all the way through the districts at the girls level, so that your gym is packed, your gym is full? Mm-hmm. Volleyball, I've seen some phenomenal crowds at a sectional final volleyball game, but then all of a sudden you go to the district level in a bigger gymnasium at a neutral site, and don't you feel like you take a step back? Like the environment is almost worse, isn't it, at the district level than it is at the sectional level, because you're no longer in somebody's gym anymore.
Well, oftentimes, especially on the final day compared to a semifinal night and different things, because you have the less teams involved or so forth. There's no doubt. Now, one thing I wanted to say on the girls that I think kind of hits on your point, there's been a thing here in Southern Ohio over the last 4 or 5 years where they started to play a lot of boys and girls double headers, or all-day events, they call it. And most of the boys coaches you talk to, not big fans of them, don't really like them. The girls coaches go back and forth a little bit, but the one thing I will say, almost every single time I've been to one of those, it's about as elite, it's as good a girls basketball atmosphere as I've ever been in. So again, a purpose for doing it is because you're expanding the game a little bit, you're improving the game. So I'll be honest, I still got a lot of thinking to do. I still got a lot of back and forth, because I find myself contradicting sport to sport. And I love what you said about making it, legitimate, making it for, the good of that particular sport. So I guess that's going to lead me, Matt, into my final thought. I wanted to throw this at you in terms of this is a big thing in leadership sometimes, of looking at that quality over the quantity. It's not necessarily I know there's a part of us and leaders that say, man, if I can make this much money on 4 or 5 home games, man, I'd like to maybe get 6 or 7. It's one of those things that, if we can do this, I wonder if we can do this a little bit more. If this fundraiser is working, maybe we can, nickel and dime them here and here and here. And after a while, what happens is it starts to lose some of those things I think we've gone over on the show. I think it starts to take away the optimism. I think it starts to take away the excitement. I think it starts to take away the personal investment, the convenience. All of those different things that I think make events and make certain things why people like them. Again, we've used sports here as an analogy tonight, but I think this is the case in all walks of life. Things that, maybe we don't get to do all the time that we really like, we kind of look forward to them, don't we? We kind of, you look forward to doing those or participating in it. Hey, I really look forward. Next time I do that, I want to try this, or I want to do this. And you start to get a personal investment and some special reasons of enjoying that. So I would challenge leaders with high school sports to think outside the box. But at the same time, I think it goes back to our mix. When you had us do the neat thing on the show, Matt, old versus new, you and I kind of came out even, if I remember correctly, in terms of there's some things that we used to do that we thought we still needed to do. There's some new things we thought definitely needed to replace. And I would keep that in mind. And as we look at this ongoing battle of education versus entertainment, look for the balance and look for things that maybe aren't the hey, let's do it just because we've always been doing it that way. Let's really make sure it's fitting today's culture and benefiting all the student athletes and the programs to go. So Matt, I'll throw it to you. I'll give you the final word this week. I think it's been kind of a fun show because, again, I had a good time looking back at things I really enjoy and trying to tie those into the high school sports and asking myself, where could we create more moments that would help high school sports be that much better into the next decade?
Yeah, as I get at my final thoughts, Shane, I want to ask you because I want to hit you with a couple questions here that are going to lead into
Sure.
my final thoughts. So just work with me on this. We started the show talking about what are some of our favorite sporting events, right? Now that's the thing you sent out on social media and you got some responses.
Right.
But what I'd be interested to know, even more specifically, and I'm going to put you on the spot here and ask you this: what are your favorite like high school sporting events that you can't miss? Like you mentioned that Reds opening day, right? The Duke Carolina, and maybe certain majors golf tournaments. But if I said to you, and maybe maybe you don't want to offend some sports by being too honest, but I guess like what are the high school sports that you go to that you just are like, man, this is camp for me. I want to watch this. This is exciting. And that's going to lead me into some thoughts I have for my final thoughts. But I just want to ask you that first. What are some of those for you?
I want to attack your question from two different angles, if you don't mind. One, in coaching, there's still something about first day of practice,
Right.
First game, first league game, all of those first are still very, very challenging. Every year brings on a new
Right.
team, a new challenge, all of those different things. When it comes to the fan side of me,
and that's more than, not to interrupt you, but that's kind of more where I was going with it. Like if your teams aren't involved, even just
okay.
as a fan, man, what do you want to go? Yeah.
I've certainly become a little bit different as I get older. I like elite matchups in elite atmospheres that are kind of fan friendly. So I'm a big tournament guy. I'm a big combo person. I'm a big go to the VA, watch tournament baseball, or on a football Friday night. I'm looking for the elite matchups, but I'll be honest. Sometimes I tend to go to facilities. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's hey, I really enjoy watching a game here. I love watching a game at Payne Valley. I love watching a game at Zane Trace with the Field Turfs at Chillicothe. Those
Right.
types of things have certainly started to go. So I think I find myself really looking for great matchups, looking for great atmospheres, but I think the venues and some of the different things go. So I would probably answer tournament matchups or league rivalry type of matchups that seem to have that high school, because I don't know about you, but I don't even have to have the number one versus number two team. I can enjoy watching
Right.
the fifth place team and the sixth place team if there's 1,000 people packed inside a high school gym with great passion for their team and competing
Right.
hard. You know what I'm saying? So to me, I don't know how you feel about it. To me, if I put coaching aside, and it's probably even where some of my juices as a coach comes from still, is I totally get excited about high school atmosphere in terms of the venues, in terms of the atmosphere and the excitement that can be in a gym or a stadium when it comes to watching sports.
Yeah, and it's funny. I'm sitting here taking notes, and it's you and I didn't discuss this beforehand, but like a lot of my thoughts kind of go with what you just said, but like almost like I was even more specific on my notes, like the things that I love to watch at the high school level. Like I still get excited for it. I left basketball out of this a little bit because it's sort of my job, right, as a coach. But like obviously, I look forward to, like you said, practice and getting the season going and all that. But like football Friday night, there's still something about that at the high
Sure.
school level that's second to none for me. I love football Friday night. I love Um, as an AD, especially the road games where I can just go out to eat and just go to the game, right?
Right.
Not have as much work. But football Friday nights. I love watching high level high school volleyball, and it goes back to
Mm.
the rules with rally scoring and how. I mean, if you really are in watching a high school volleyball game that you're rooting for a team, especially, man, you're hanging on every point. I mean, think about the momentum shifts. You're a big volleyball fan.
Mhm.
I don't know that any sport where momentum shifts faster and more drastically than volleyball. It's like everything in the world's going right, and all of a sudden, 5 points later, you're in a mess, and timeouts are being called to try to kill momentum. So, like, that's one for me. If it's the right matchup, Shayne, I enjoy volleyball. Um, Rivalry games, like where there's two teams going at each other, like you talked about, in a packed gym, right? They don't even
Mhm.
have to be the best two teams in the league. Maybe
No,
it's just a rivalry where they're getting
right.
after each other. And then I love watching night baseball. And you don't see a lot of this at the high school level. Now, we're lucky enough in our area with the VA to get some of that. But there's, like, I go to a lot of your baseball games, right? And I enjoy going to them, but I don't enjoy as much having to rush around and get there at 5 o'clock and stand over by the fence. And man, the sun's in my face on this side. Let me go to the other side. This facility
Right.
sucks. I can't see anything.
Most high school facilities are not fan friendly.
No,
And
there's not. I mean,
I have not realized that until I do my scouting.
yeah,
In
yeah.
terms
All
of,
of a sudden, it's like I got to take my lawn chair because the bleachers, I can't,
right.
But if I go out to watch you play at the VA in a night game, I kick back with a hot dog. I'm up in the bleachers. It's a perfect view. It's the weather's cooled down, right? It's nice and
Mm,
comfortable. So, but think about what I just said. Now, I was a little more specific, but what did we talk about? Facilities, right?
yeah.
Like being at the right place,
Atmosphere.
matchups, the atmosphere, the facilities, right? The time of the game, all those things lead to that fan experience that I think it goes to what you're just saying. We have to start thinking at times as coaches and as athletic administrators, as leaders, we have to put our fan hat on sometimes and think about these people that are paying to get into the games. What are we providing to them? And it's not just about the product on the floor, because let's face it, at the high school level, sometimes your team's going to be good, sometimes they're going to
Right.
be not so good, right? But are we providing good facilities? Are we providing games at a time where people can get off work and get there to enjoy the games and things like that? What can we do? Can we add lights to our baseball field? I mean, I know that's a heck of a cost, but man, could you think about doing that? Think about some of the neat things you could do with that. Could we say, hey, listen, we're going to you want to create an atmosphere at the beginning of a basketball season that's exciting? Let's have the best two teams in the league playing the opening night. All of a sudden, why do we have to wait a week and a half to play league basketball games, right? Let's get after it right from the start. There's some things you could do to
Mm.
stimulate excitement within a sport, but I think as athletic leaders, we have to think that way a little bit. I think you mentioned in your final thoughts, I think you worded it as think outside the box a little bit, right? And that's and
Right.
that's that's probably ultimately what we have to do. But this has been a fun show just to stir up some of those thoughts, I think, and it was fun getting the feedback from listeners as well.
Well, it is, and I think we've talked so many things that we can't learn from college and pros. I just felt like this is a topic that you could kind of. I think it does relate to high school, and I think it's important for coaches, for athletic directors to kind of to stop and think in this way sometimes, and think about, man, as we go in. I would challenge any AD. Like I coach at a school that if you take our size of school, I would put our facilities up against anybody in the state of Ohio. You know what I
Right.
mean? In terms of, I'm not saying that we're better. I'm just saying that I would put us up there in terms of we offer our kids, and that's come with some dynamic leadership, and that's come with some people thinking outside the box and doing some creative things in terms of all of our facilities to do those things. And so again, I would really challenge people to take a look at their facilities, take a look at their schedules, take a look at their communities, work with your league schools and so forth, to just always try to continue to move forward. So, Matt, don't want to cut you off. Anything else this
No,
week?
no, I don't have anything. It was a fun show. I mean, I know, we talked some serious topics and maybe not quite as as serious show as some that we've had, but I think at the same time there's something to be learned from some of this, I think, and it was fun. It was fun looking at some of this stuff.
Well, guys, on that thought, let me give some quick contact information. Look us up on all social media. We're out there. Just use SVC Sports Zone, and you'll have no problem finding me on Twitter, Facebook. If you want more private conversation, I know some people use the Facebook Messenger, which is great. Email is admin1@svcsportszone.com. And Obviously, looks up here on YouTube. If you're out there listening on the podcast apps, be it iHeart, Spotify, iTunes, all of them, come on over to YouTube and check our video out. All 15 shows up there now. Of expanding the zone. So this was kind of a different twist tonight. It was kind of fun. Matt and I have some really, really unique topics coming up. So we encourage you to just subscribe. That way you never miss one. Look for us out there on social media. Always try to put some teasers out there and so forth. But I would say somewhere here in the next month or two, we still have some of our best shows ahead. So we're real excited. So on that note, we're going to get on out of here. For Matt Combs, this is Shayne Combs. Again, we appreciate all the support here in our 15 shows of Expanding the Zone. Thanks, everyone.